Photography Daily is a Loading Zone production.
Robin Hood, riding through Is it Glen? It can't be Woods again, because that wouldn't be right. Can't be Forest, that doesn't scan. I forget my Robin Hood story. Guess where I am? Would it be Sherwood Forest, Neil? Aha, yes it is. How did you guess? Yes, the Photowalk this week in Sherwood Forest. Last night I was, I sort of wear two hats in my world, as those who listen regularly will know. One of them is a photographer, as you would expect. This is a photography podcast, after all. And the other is as a voiceovers, and last night, specifically, the voice of God. And it's a job I do every now and then. In fact, a couple of months ago, I was in Leeds, which is where I was last night, and I was doing an awards ceremony as the voice of God. What, pray, Neil, is the voice of God? I shall tell you. It's kind of an omnipotent voice that commands people on awards nights to take your seat, pray hush for the comedian, and delivers the names of the nominated for each of the 18 awards. So I'm never allowed to actually announce the winner. Always the bridesmaid, never the bride. Except I did make that mistake on the last awards, and for the first two or three I think I announced them, much to the displeasure of the organiser. I'm surprised I was invited back. So yes, that's what the voice of God does. I used to do quite a few before the invention of COVID. Well, I know COVID's not a new invention, but you know what I mean. The days prior to when Dr. Anthony Fauci or Chris Whitty were household names. Do you think they'll ever be allowed to do I'm a Celebrity? I'm not trying to obviously be too frivolous about it, but they are the kind of characters that you could imagine being invited onto that show, couldn't you? Just a thought. PI Awards last night it was, that's what it was, PI Awards, which when I first got the paperwork I thought, PI, private investigator? They surely can't have a large awards ceremony, could they? In Leeds? You wouldn't want to go on stage if you were a private investigator, would you? Shh, don't give me an award. I'm trying to be undercover. But no, it was personal injury, which made far more sense. An insurance one. And such large awards given out last night, such as the Personal Injury Catastrophic Lawyer of the... No, that's not right. Personal Injury Catastrophic Injury. Catastrophic Injury Lawyer of the Year. Yeah, that must have been it. I did scribble some notes down. Catastrophic... What a title, eh, to have on your desk. What's that, Dad? What have you won there? I am the Catastrophic Injury Lawyer of the Year, son. You have to be pretty catastrophically injured to have been represented by the Catastrophic Injury Lawyer of the Year. So, yeah, that's what I was doing, Voice of God, last night. And the reason for telling you that is last time, of course, we did the show from the Leeds and Liverpool Canal the following morning. I sort of walked a short length, 2-3 miles of the 127 miles that exist. And I thought, well, should we do a little bit more of that? And I thought, no, I tell you what, I'll get in car and I'll drive south back towards Berkshire, my home, and I shall drop off somewhere. And there it was, the sign as I went south going, ah! It was the Sherwood Forest sign. So that's where I went, and I've ended up here. It's completely silent. I tell you what, a couple of 100 years ago, although my studio self will tell me in a moment, you probably wouldn't have wanted necessarily to be making too much noise as you came through here, for obvious reasons. So anyway, we have two guests today. I want to play an edited version of the late Tom Stoddart's chat with me about his book, Extraordinary Women, as a tribute to him. We mentioned him last week, of course we did, and I wanted to revisit his book this week because it's an amazing photography book. And then, so lucky to have had a chat with Susan Goldberg, really, the editor-in-chief at none other than National Geographic magazine. And I want you to consider this. National Geo have millions, literally millions of pictures in their vast archive. Millions, did you say, Neil? Yes, millions. So how do you even go about finding 250 that tell the story of the 21st century so far in a special book.
Today on the Photowalk.
We are used to really making a lot of hard choices when it comes to images. We've got about 2 million images coming into the National Geographic Archives every single year. So to do a book about the 21 years of the 21st century means you've got about, 42 million images that you're looking at. And I cannot tell you, I looked at every one of them. I think what we were looking for were, of course, images that tell the story, that make people stop, that make them look more deeply at what was going on.
Stories of life told by photographers, and today more of your stories about what photography means to you, why you make pictures, what you make them about, how your camera helps you to see the world. It's a very different type of photography show, made out in the wilds today in Sherwood Forest, England, on a walk. Me with my camera, you with yours, earbuds and a mailbag of letters, plus of course our guests Susan Goldberg and the late great Tom Stoddart, and former guests with snippets of inspiration too, peppered through the show. I'll tell you about today's letter topics in a moment. First though, lend me a minute so I can share something about those who support this photo walk. My friends at mpb.com are very, very precious to this show. They are the number one platform in the UK, US and Europe when it comes to buying, selling, trading, quality used kit online. They help photographers like you to tell your unique stories by giving you a safe place to buy and trade and sell the kit you need. And in doing so, you become part of the sustainable circular economy. A picture, a moment can change the way we feel. It can change how we view the world. It can even provoke and change history. So sell the kit you're not using. Trade it in for the kit you need to create. Buy used, spend less, and get more. Go to mpb.com. Our patrons too are so precious with your generous and thoughtful support to help keep the show ticking. From the price of one high street coffee per month, you are helping to build this show so that it can continue its mission to become a super diverse community of photographers from every interest, every background, helping to guide, support and mentor photographers worldwide. It's early days, and I'll tell you more about one of our patrons soon in Patron of the Day. So, today we're walking in woodland, forestry. Forestry that legend will have you believe was the stamping ground for Robin Hood and his merry men who stole from the rich to give to the poor. If you were rich and had the horse and cart version of a Tesla, well, you were fair game, it would seem. Though, really, and I'm sorry to burst your bubble, this is probably part of English history that's the stuff of folklore. Characters like Robin definitely existed, but whether there was actually one single Robin, and Robin Hood at that, is very much debated. Stealing from the rich to give to the poor, though, to stand up for the common man in the face of tyranny, was a thing. But these early charitable habits came with a bit of a heavy cost, namely a meeting with a noose. These days, walking in Sherwood Forest with a nice North Face jacket and X-Pro 1 is safe enough. But where the forest becomes denser, you can't help but wonder, is this where someone like, or maybe even the real legend protagonist, might have been waiting? I'll tell you what, he's not having my Garibaldi's. On today's show then, some feedback from last week. It seems Nick Brandt captured your imagination, making cameras out of tin cans. A very different kind of Christmas prezi. We're a little worse for we're in Denmarkland. We're finding out why one of the world's best photographers of ocean scenes chooses the square picture, and it's not because of Insta. A story of gratitude, too, from a holiday in Cornwall, and we look at your 365s. Shall we walk then? Yes, coffee and Garibaldi's packed. Check. Boots on and laced. Check. Warm walking pants today. Check. Spare batteries. Check. Fillmore cards. Check. Earbuds in. Check. Lens caps off. Let's walk.
You're going to hear a lot of leaves today. That seems to be the understory in this forest. All the leaves have dropped. There is a magnificent tree here. Well, it's a dead tree now, sadly, but why? I mean, it doesn't even look real. It looks like something out of a Harry Potter set. The Whomping Willow minus branches. It's almost like, it's weird. It's got face and eyes, and it's gnarly, and it's fantastic. And I want to take a picture. And I'm with my jacket, my warmer jacket, since the winter is starting to strike now, so I can put you in my top pocket and talk while I'm on the microphone while I'm making a picture. So let's put you in the pocket. Today I'm on the 12mm Samyang lens on my Fujifilm X Pro 1. And it's early morning, and really, I was hoping for some mist. That would have been fantastic, but no mist today. We just have, it's a very grey morning, so we're not going to have any really beautifully contrasty pictures. But where are we? F28, 1/25. Let's go F60th. And then I can choose to not go so shallow. F4. And there we go. Here comes a gnarly tree shot. ISO 800. Take you out my pocket. If I were a tour guide, I've always wanted to be a tour guide, I'd make it up as I go along. I'd say this was the original tree that Robin Hood used to sit under and sing with Richard Littlejohn. No, he was a journalist, Neil. Lives in America now. No, not Richard. Richard Littlejohn used to be with Robin Hood while they were taking money from the poor to give to the rich. No, Neil, it's the other way around. You see, my history would be dreadful. I'd make it up as I went along, but it would be very irreverent. At the end of today's show, I have a very important question to ask, possibly the most important so far. Neil, you're being overly dramatic. No, maybe, I don't know. We'll see. Last week, I appreciate, was a full-on week, a very long episode. But Nick Brandt, such an important guest when you consider what we've been talking about in the news when it comes to climate change and COP. And so anyway, we'll start with a couple of bits of feedback on that episode. First up from Morris Webster, a good friend of the show. Hello, Neil. Quick email to thank you for the latest Photowalk, and particularly the interview with Nick Brandt. I had the pleasure of seeing his On This Earth A Shadow Falls Across the Ravaged Land exhibition at Fotografiska in Stockholm, whilst on a family city break in 2015. That's the way to do it. I'm going off for the day to look at an exhibition. Are you okay, family? It's all right, Dad. Off you trot. We'll see you 5 o'clock in the bar. I recall my reaction to his work was the same as yours and Giles. Yes, I was talking about my good friend Giles. And I promised Giles I wouldn't mention him this week. There we go. That we snuck that one in under the radar. His photographs are truly wonderful, and it was a real pleasure to hear from the man behind the camera on your latest interview. As always, thanks for the work and bringing these gems to your audience. These gems, I assume, are wonderful guests. Of course, best Morris. And you might be thinking, that was a very long title for an exhibition. What was that? On This Earth, A Shadow Falls Across the Ravaged Land. Well, that's because it was actually his three works. They fed on from each other, and the title of each eventually made, this much longer encapsulating title for the entire work. So On This Earth was one of them. A Shadow Falls, another. See, they all make sense in and of themselves, and Across the Ravaged Land. So you put them all together. On This Earth, A Shadow Falls Across the Ravaged Land. Very ingenious. And continuing with Nick, one from Jake Grierson. I went to school with a Grierson. I don't know what his first name was. I know his surname. I don't know what his first name was. It wasn't Jake. We didn't really know surnames at school. I went to the kind of school where nobody had a first name. You were just called by your last. James, do your homework. James, you're last again. James, detention. So Grierson, what was Grierson's first name? All I do remember was he was a terrific cross-country runner. He was faster than everybody. Huge, long legs. James, that was it. James Grierson. Funny surname. I was doing... Oh, there we go. I should have put 2 and 2 together while I was doing the piece about my own surname then, shouldn't I? James Grierson. He was a terrific runner. I wonder if he's a photographer. James, are you listening? What are the chances of that? Anyway, this is Jake, not James. Jake Grierson. Hello, Neil. Just wanted to drop a line to thank you for the episode featuring a photographic hero of mine, Nick Brandt. Like you, I saw that Inherit the Dust show at Photo London. I shamefully didn't know of him or his work prior to that exhibition, but that first viewing will never leave me. What's special about Nick is that he's earned much respect as a photographer, but it's his work as an activist to preserve the animals and the lands that he loves so much in East Africa that raises the bar for all other photographers involved in fine art wildlife photography. I tell you what, you can't call him a wildlife photographer because it was one of the conversations we had prior to the interview. He's not too keen on being called a wildlife photographer because he's so much more. We were trying to find a label, and I think he felt a little uneasy at a label, environmental photographer. He said, maybe, but just photographer will do. And as Jake says, he doesn't just make or take work of the subject, he gives back, and that is a special gift. Talking of which, you mentioned Christmas gifts last week. I think for any photographer in your life, Nick's latest books, The Day May Break, or This Empty World, are fabulous. And, of course, if that photographer is particularly special, you can purchase signed ones with proceeds going to Nick's Big Life Foundation. You get to help the plight too. Thank you again from Jake. Nice plug, Jake, and a worthy one at that. And, of course, as far as inspiration goes at the start of today's show, I'm just going to rewind 7 days and play you an excerpt from last week's show talking to the supremely talented, inventive, extraordinary photographer, Nick Brandt.
I consider it my mission in life to express my feelings about the disappearance and destruction of the natural world for both animals and humans. With climate change, that's why I absolutely had to bring humans into the literal foreground for the first time, because we are all being fundamentally impacted by what humans have done to this planet. And that is not going to end, the destruction is not going to end anytime soon. So I fully expect to go to my deathbed angry, but hopefully also active.
The voice of Nick Brandt, and I wholeheartedly agree to the idea of Nick's books, any of his books, including the signed ones. I tell you what, I'll put a link on the website today so you can, if it's a special gift, you can follow that link and receive a signed dedicated one. I tell you what, here we are, Sherwood Forest today, doing the Photowalk show. Just me with my microphone, both of us with our cameras. It's sprawling, and you know I love to be in the countryside on my own taking my photo walks. I get a bit microphone shy. Walking along talking into a microphone. I'm going to have to get over that because, of course, the retreat which I introduced last week, in the retreat we're going to go and make a program together. So you get to see exactly how it's done. Yes, you get to see the secrets, but you get to be a part of that secret because I want you to help present, produce, record the show as well. But this is sprawling. Absolutely adore it. Oh, I wish this was on my doorstep. Oh, you could walk Sherwood Forest for years and probably never even touch the edges. Is that the correct expression? There's a sign here. Where do I go? Visitor centre, 1 mile. Yeah, well, that's going to take me more towards people, isn't it? I could walk on the other way. Let's walk the other way. Let's do that. I did try to park up at the visitor centre, and the cost for parking, I mean, there's an irony in being robbed for the parking money at Sherwood Forest, isn't there? Can you understand the irony? Yes, I can, Neil. Look at this. I'm not sure if you even call this, it's a stump, but it's almost like a stump from a stump. It's a trunk from a trunk. It's this, I mean, look at the texture. I need to make a photograph and put this on the show notes today. The show notes, as ever, include the pictures that you've been making as we read out some of your emails and the photo walks that you've been taking. But also, I usually put I always put my sketchbook, as we call them. I used to call them scrapbook, but I'm calling them sketchbook now. Sketchbook pictures up from my walks. Let me get a picture of this. Pop you in the pocket. Right, what are we at? Camera settings. As I say, the camera settings aren't really too relevant. It's nice to share with you going through the motions of making a picture. I'll stick at 60th. I'm hand holding, but I'm nice and steady. ISO 800 60th, and let's make this picture. Get a bit closer actually, just to get this sort of gnarls. The gnarls, is that the correct expression? I'm manually focusing, so I'm using the focus peaking on the camera. There we go. That is just, I mean, how old is this? See, this is where my imagination really starts to play well. Robin Hood, he sat here, he did, singing a song with Maid Marian. Number 1 of the charts, so it was. What was that song? Everything I do it for you. Neil, you really are getting your history wrong here. No, seriously, that was it. It was number 1 for ages. Stand by for Seamless Link, since we were talking about Nick's books for Christmas. Talking of Christmas, since we did mention it last week as well, actually. Incidentally, the tree goes up in our place this weekend. I'm going to digress for a second. Last year, the Christmas tree, well, it went up in the start of December, and then Boris cancelled Christmas. What was it, 19th? Literally days before Christmas, possibly 20. I don't know, I can't remember. We were all looking forward to a Christmas with family. What a year. And then Boris, who said, we're not going to cancel Christmas, a few days before said, cancel Christmas. Yeah, so there was that. We left the Christmas tree up. We went into lockdown. We didn't really come out, did we, for a good few months again. So we left the Christmas tree up. We always have a Christmas do with some very good friends of ours, the Henners. And Christmas with the Henners is a very important date in the diary. We sort of have it's not a dress rehearsal for Christmas. It's the start of Christmas with the Henners. And they weren't able to come because, of course, we went into lockdown. We had all the food. Honestly, we had so much food. We had food for the Henners and then food for the family. So when they talk about having lots of turkey curry, turkey sandwiches, turkey this and turkey that, I'm sorry for those that are vegetarian or vegans, but we had a lot of turkey. So we decided to, we kept the Christmas decorations up until the Henners were able to come and do the Henners Christmas dinner. And it just so happened that didn't occur till April. So we had a Christmas tree. It was like Christmas in the house all the way till April, without the gifts every day, clearly. That was very strange. It's going to be odd having the Christmas tree up just until it's supposed to come down again, because there is that superstition about Twelfth Night, isn't there, with Christmas trees? But we couldn't take the Christmas tree down before the Henners' Christmas do. Anyway, I digress. Some Christmas bits with that seamless link. First up from Lynn Fraser, 2 Christmas bits. First from Lynn. Hi Neil, here's an idea for Christmas presents for the photographer in your life. We were asking for Christmas gift ideas for those that like making pictures. So what have you got? A solar can. Yes, a solar can, which is essentially, says Lynn, a pinhole camera that creates an image of the sun's path. You put it out somewhere and you just leave it to do its thing. My first was out for a whole year. I've had to play with a couple. The images are attached, actually. But it was a great fun prezi. Yeah, so there's 2 images from Lynn. I've put them on the show page today so you can see what Solar Can is all about. I'll put a link to solarcan.co.uk as well. Let me try and explain a bit further, though, because for any photographer, this could be one of those, I don't know, try it and you might have a bit of fun with it as you create moments, I think. It is literally a camera in a tin can. I mean, it looks like it could have been the logos for it looks like it could be some kind of energy drink. Let me read you the gen from their website. Born from a love of photography, art and astronomy, Solar Can is a unique camera designed to produce extreme time exposures that capture the sun's path across the sky. Preloaded with photographic paper, Solar Can is a complete camera package with precision drilled pinhole, plus cover, instructions, fastenings, and a handy storage tube. Very handy. Solar Can has everything you need to start creating beautiful solargraphy, that's right, isn't it? Solargraphy? photographs. Doesn't seem to scan correctly, does it? Showcase your images with us in our online gallery and on social media, which is at The Solar Can. They say on their Insta that they are the world's first commercially available extreme time exposure camera. And I've never seen anything quite like this. Fantastic. Marvellous. There we go. If you practice stockings, then there's one for the Christmas stocking, definitely. Thank you for that, Lynn. Fabulous idea. I'll put that on the show page today. One from Jens Roder in Denmark land, who is in on early Christmas spirit. Hello, Neil. He says, time for a Photowalk report from me. As of late, many of the podcast episodes have been listening to in the car driving here and there, often to and from work assignments. But this week was different. It's time for the yearly Christmas party at work, and since I work for a company with HQ in the Copenhagen area, the party is held, and guess where? Would it be Copenhagen? Yes. So I travelled all the way from Jutland to Copenhagen. I could have listened to the podcast on the train, but since the party is held in one of the adjoining restaurants to the Tivoli garden, I decided to go early and then take my photo walk in the old garden. Oh, fantastic idea. Every year they decorate for Christmas, and when I say decorate, I actually mean they go completely bonkers. That's a very English word, Jens. A very English word. They drape lights on lots of the trees, put coloured lights along footpaths and so on. The number of lights is staggering and it looks beautiful. And of course, one finds all kind of booths where hot drinks and sweets can be purchased all too easily, but no Garibaldis. See, there's the drawback. Have Garibaldis not made it to Christmas markets? No? I bought my Fujifilm X-E2 35mm 1.4 along for the walk, and for a bit of fun, I attached my mist filter to fog things up a bit. Everything is shot in JPEG, slightly underexposed, and then I've done minor corrections on my iPad in the Photos app. I'm travelling light on this trip, he says. Now I'm back at the hotel after the Christmas party, and I'm thoroughly infused with a massive dose of Christmas. Well, I'm surprised you got the words out. So, ho, 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 a Merry Christmas, he says to all, and attached to a few shots from the walk. Kind regards, Jens Roder. Thank you, Jens, and yes, I'll put those pictures on the show page. I know Christmas isn't for everyone, and it's not observed by everyone, but these are super pictures. Go and see them. They'll be on the show page today, which I'll link to, as always, in the app. Right, inspiration. We must do something on the show about the decisions we make early on in our photography that become a sort of our signature, perhaps. Perhaps that's the word I'm looking for here. Certainly our style. The decisions we make from, I suppose, from genre, what we like to shoot, right through to how we present our work, either online or in print form. And from earlier on this year, here's Jonathan Critchley, who is this, force of nature, quite literally, when it comes to fine art, ocean photography. If you go to his website, which I'll, of course, link to today on the show page, the first thing that may hit you is that all of his images are square format, which is not necessarily what you may be expecting from these beautiful oceanic vistas. But there's a wonderful reason why it is this way, and it's not what I expected at all when I asked him. Turns out it could have been because of a portable telly that he had that effectively had a square screen.
When I was very small, I think my father, again, must have passed me. There's this very small black and white, and it must have been 8 inches square, something like that. Tiny little thing, not even that, smaller.
Was it the one where you had to turn the knob on the front to tune it in?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
One of those.
Yeah.
And it was completely square and black and white. And so, yes, I remember that vividly, and those memories again of childhood, very happy childhood, and connecting that with happiness, I suppose. Maybe that's something. But there are, yes, also the fact that when I started studying photography more seriously, I was using Hasselblad cameras, which of course also square format, which I really liked. So there's a number of reasons why that it might be, but that one, again, I like the nostalgia behind that one, so I'm going to stick with that one.
Marvellous. Jonathan Critchley. And as I said before, I'll link to his episode and his website on the show page today. Photowalk, that's what we're on. Our weekly photo walk, me with my microphone, us with our cameras, just quietly making some images as we walk and read the letters that you've sent into the show. And I have, as I say, a request right at the end of today's show, a very important one, possibly the most important, Neil. Were you being overly dramatic? Maybe. No, I don't think so. Yeah, you were. No, really I wasn't. Thank you to those who've been sending in their pictures for the 365, which is great. I mean, it's really growing apace now. We started our 365 the wrong time of the year. Usually, 365, you start them at the start of the year. Well, it seems to be where most people start them. They start them January 1st, don't they? But no, we started September. Just to be different, obviously. Send them in, please. Continue sending them in. That's what makes that's what puts the daily into Photography Daily. In case you're thinking, hang on, it's a Friday show. How's that daily? Well, the 365. That's what makes it daily. Send them in 2,000 pixels wide. A bit of a description, if you can, please. Doesn't have to be an essay. No, it could just be the description. It's great to know where they were made in the world, and please send them in unwatermarked for this particular feature. And of course, we'll if you make sure that you put down the link that you want me to use, even if you've emailed in before, please put down the link that you would like me to use. It's much easier when I'm sat there uploading them, if you can do that for me. Let's look at a few. Number 78, Duncan Ferguson, Glencoe in Scotland, from adventuring with his van called Rita the Ranger. There is another picture to come, actually, with Rita in the picture. Number 66, we had Lars Heggard, side of a lake, with this wonderfully quiet picture of, well, it was simply a rowing boat with light mist background washing across this lake in Silkeborg. He wrote to this beautifully calm image. He said, I occasionally look forward to my retirement. A bit premature, maybe. It'll probably be 10 years before I retire, but I dream of owning a boat at that time. It could be a rowing boat, he says, like this. Though I'd prefer a small sailboat with a tiny cabin to sit and enjoy tranquility, drinking Nescafe. An essential element of my future sailing trips must be a bottle of locally brewed beer. Now we're talking. Pulled on a string behind the boat to maintain the proper temperature of the beer until the lunch break. I will disguise the setup as a fishing rod with a line. When other sailors pass and ask any luck, I'll say, oh yes. Not that you've been thinking about it, Lars, but that's a lovely picture that you paint. Your dream of the sailboat and towing from your fishing rod line the beer behind. Keep sending them in, please. That's what this community is all about. Sharing your images. They don't have to be. We've had some fantastic images that look like they've taken a long time to set up and think about, but they don't have to be that. They can be the simple things of life that you just see. That's what a 365 is about as well. And it's really nice that we can just journey around the world with your images, because they're coming from all four corners right now. So keep sending them in. To our guests then, two today actually, and I'm going to start with Susan Goldberg, who is the editor-in-chief at National Geographic magazine. When I was contacted, and Susan was available to have a chat for a while, I did leap a bit, I must profess. National Geo, what's not to love? But they have a new book out, and we really could have linked to this too, to our Christmas gifts list, which by the way, I want you to keep suggesting. Keep sending me your thoughts about books and gift ideas. That solar candle I've just been looking at it some more, actually. Inspired. But the book that National Geo have is called 21st Century, Photographs from the Image Collection. 21 years of the 21st century. 21 and 21. It's poetic. If there was ever an excuse to make a book, that's the marriage of numbers, isn't it? 2 decades in, and National Geographic now includes drone and smartphone use in this huge image collection too, which has a mind-boggling number of pictures now, as you can imagine. They have one of the world's most popular Instagram accounts too, which is at NatGeo, N-A-T-G-E-O, close to 200 million followers now. So this is a book about news, it's about portraits, some behind-the-scenes stuff as well. But where do you even start with a book from National Geographic? Who makes the final decision upon what goes in? Somebody who likes responsibility, I would say, and that someone is Susan Goldberg.
An 8-week internship at the Seattle Post-Intelligencer is where this incredible time as a journalist began. But I've read that you credit your early career success, Susan, to that time there as well. And I think we all have fondness, don't we, for the first newsroom we stepped into, don't we?
Oh, absolutely. And, I look back at that internship sort of as the start of everything good that's ever really happened to me started there at the Seattle Post-Intelligencer.
Well, what did you learn particularly, do you think?
I think I learned that I wanted to, be a journalist more than anything. I had been a journalist in college, but just that 8 weeks, and I covered everything from plane crashes to a square dance festival. I just was so excited by getting up every day, by being around the newspaper, by being around those kind of people, by that jolt of energy every day, by the adrenaline rush of it all, by having a deadline and getting up and doing it all over again the next day. I just absolutely loved it. And to me, it was addicting, and it's been addicting for 42 years.
Do you know, I'm not sure if this is an unfair question, really, Susan, but I remember my first sub-editor, who was a chap that worked on Fleet Street, named Ron, who was a proper grumpy man, and introduced me to the newsroom really at the sharp end of making tea for him for at least 2 weeks of that, I think. Do you have a character that you think, again, we'll use that word fondly of during those formative weeks there?
Oh, well, there were so many, but I also remember the editor well. His name was Jim Rennie, and he was a Canadian guy, quite emotional, I would say, kind of a little over the top, sometimes yelled, sometimes was, super friendly, laughed loudly. I was terrified of him, completely terrified of him. So I remember at the end of the 8-week internship, he came up to me and he kind of growled all the time. He said, "So kid, do you want to stay?" It's like, yeah, I want to stay. And that's how I got my first job. I actually wasn't quite done with college. I still had 12 credits to go. So I had to call up my dad, who was a college professor. And I say, "Pop, I am dropping out of college and I'm going to stay here at the Seattle Post-Intelligencer and I'm going to be a reporter full time." And there's this long pause on the phone. My dad is back in Michigan. Silence, silence, silence. And then my dad says the most unexpected thing he had ever said to me, which was, "Good for you, Susan. We're very proud of you."
Wow.
And I don't know where he found that within himself, because I thought he was going to have a different response completely. And that's really where I feel like my career began. And I always do tell people, though, I did finally finish college, but it took like 8 years. But it was that moment where, my dad's not just begrudging approval, but his endorsement of my choice, it gave me so much confidence to go forward.
Being a female journalist in a newsroom, and you said 42 years ago, times, and I know this from talking to photojournalists and journalists, incredible trailblazing women of the newsroom around the world, that they said times were very different then.
Times were very different then, although frankly, times have not changed as much as I wish that they would have. I think young female journalists, young journalists generally, and people of color in our profession continue to face a lot of barriers and a lot of obstacles, and women in particular face a fair degree of harassment. I think we think about it in different ways than we used to, thank goodness, right? Because it never would have occurred to me really to complain or to, I just sort of kept doing what I was doing. But I should have complained a bunch of times, right? I should have complained when I was a young journalist covering the state capitol in Lansing, Michigan, and I walked into the press room of UPI, United Press International, a former news service, and there up on the wall were all these Playboy centerfolds tacked up on the wall. I mean, like, really? This is a professional newsroom located inside the capital of the state of Michigan, and I actually just was sort of sighed, rolled my eyes, and went about my business. But it was that kind of stuff that we almost became inured to, and we shouldn't have, right? We should have gone, get that down. That's inappropriate. And now I'm really glad, women would say that. And anybody should say that. Frankly, men should say that too. But then we didn't say that.
Well, we don't sadly have time to plot and chart your entire career. And I sense we could be here for a good couple of hours if we did. But I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued by how you became editor, then editor-in-chief at National Geographic magazine. And in a career of firsts, it is worth pointing out that you are the first woman to become editor in its, I did the maths, 133-year history.
Right. So I've been editor for 8 years. So I guess you could say it only took them 126 years to find a woman for the job.
I knew you were going to do that. And I was thinking, I'm sure my maths hasn't done its job properly.
Well, look, the fact is I'm 62 years old. So my career has developed on this seam of societal change. So I've been honored and had the opportunity to be the first woman this and the first woman that a whole bunch of different times. I was the first female editor of the San Jose Mercury News and the first female editor of the Cleveland Plain Dealer and the first woman to run Bloomberg's Washington Bureau. And then eventually I became the first female editor-in-chief of National Geographic. But I must tell you that we're going to be living in a better place when there are fewer female firsts, right? When just having a woman in charge is the normal course of doing business, whether you're talking about journalism or banking or law or politics or whatever it is. But I think it is largely because of the age that I am and the opportunities that I therefore was able to have.
Does the responsibility weigh particularly heavy, knowing how respected the magazine is and the fact that for many it's the trusted source and conduit to their knowledge about the world, isn't it?
Well, I certainly think, particularly in the early days when people did not travel as much, right? As you point out, the magazine starts in 1888 and it, comes up during period of colonialism. America, certainly in the early part of the 20th century, people did not get out the way they do now. And so I do think we provided a first view of the world to many people beyond their own communities, and for some people, perhaps even beyond their own neighborhood. Yeah. And there's a huge responsibility in that. And the responsibility is to get the story right in words and in pictures, and to make sure our journalism is authentic. And that is something that, we work on and struggle with continually. And I think the burden now is sharper than ever, right? We know that just parachuting people into exotic locales is not the way to go about it. We really need to find people who are familiar with the places where we're telling those stories from, both in words and in pictures. And there's only one good thing I'll tell you about COVID, and that is that it really forced us to crank up something we were already doing, which is making sure that we've got journalists in places that all over the world. So we're not just flying people in there. When we want to tell a story out of South Africa, let's use a South African photographer. We don't do that every single time, but we're doing that more and more and more.
We talk, as you would imagine, on a photography podcast about citizen photojournalism, getting a photograph that otherwise may not be captured. And that's possible thanks to 15 billion mobile devices out there at the latest 2021 estimated figures. How has that affected what you see, Susan, and take on in one of the world's most famous outlets for quality journalism and pictures? Well,
it's interesting. The advent of cell phone cameras and everybody having a camera with them 24/7. Initially, I thought, this is going to not be great because everybody's posting their pictures on Instagram, which is true. But the fact is most people can't take pictures worth a darn, right? And I count myself among them. I am not a professional photographer by any stretch. And so it does make me appreciate the craft and the skill and the bravery and the patience and all of the things that go into being a great photographer. And our photographers, use use their phones to take pictures too. The cameras are quite good, and it does allow them, particularly in crowded places, in scenes, in protests or something, to kind of fade into the woodwork. They look just like everybody else with a phone, right? They don't have these giant lenses hanging off their necks. And so it does allow them to kind of fade into the woodwork and get those authentic images. But I really do think the more images there are in the world, the more great photography stands out as exceptional. And I think it explains why we're the largest brand on Instagram. There is no brand larger than National Geographic on Instagram.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I wanted to mention that a bit, because Instagram has this kind of love-hate relationship with photography and photographers, despite it being a platform that they grace. I was going to ask what your opinion of the platform is. Obviously, it's important, but do you have a personal stance on it as well?
Well, look, I think it has been an incredibly important commercial platform for National Geographic. We've got about 190 million followers across our various Instagram accounts. I think our main account has around 175 or 180 million followers. It is an important way for people to see our work, to get them into National Geographic. Of course, some people will just scroll through and look at the pictures and read the captions, but other people will start to get really interested. They'll swipe up into the stories. They'll want to engage with us across more and more platforms beyond Instagram. Yeah. So Instagram sort of just becomes their way into a larger National Geographic world, and I think it's a very important commercial proposition for us.
The book itself involved you spending, I don't know, Susan, how many hours, weeks, months finding definitive images. How did you even start?
Well, it's really hard, and it's something we do every day, right? With what images are going to be on Instagram, images are going to be on nationalgeographic.com or in our monthly magazine or in our great books. So we are used to really making a lot of hard choices when it comes to images. We've got about 2 million images coming into the National Geographic archives every single year. So to do a book about the 21 years of the 21st century means you've got about, 42 million images that you're looking at. And I cannot tell you I looked at every one of them. But I think what we were looking for were, of course, images that tell the story, that make people stop, that make them look more deeply at what was going on, whether it's something they were familiar with, like the images, for instance, around 9/11. We have several photographs of that, or something that happened that they had no idea was going on, or shows them some aspect of nature or how the planet is changing because of climate change that they did not know, and draws them into what is our shared story of the 21st century.
The major events, of which there are many already, included the pivotal 9/11, that central event from which many others formed. How did you even start to decide how that could be represented from all those images that you have as a larger body and collection?
One of the images that we included in there of 9/11, it doesn't show the towers at all. It's a picture by Lynn Johnson, who is one of our most wonderful longtime contributors. And it's a picture of 3 first responders. And for anybody who is old enough to remember 9/11, you can just look at these 3 people and they're all looking up. And you see kind of this dust in the air and the expression on their face and the shock and the horror of it. And you know exactly what day it is, even though you don't see the towers. All you see is these 3 people looking up. And you know exactly where you are and what has just happened for anybody old enough to have been there. And I think in some ways, too, this book is not just a great journey through time for those of us who have lived it, but it's a great history for younger people who haven't lived it.
I suppose really emotionally it must have affected you putting this together. There are some harrowing pictures in there.
Well, there are harrowing pictures, but there are happy pictures. There's inspirational pictures. But hopefully, more than anything, I think they're pictures that make you think, right? Yeah. Make you stop and make you think.
Is it fair to ask what are the biggest moments for you that you knew you had to feature? 9/11 would clearly be one of those.
We've got a number of pictures in here around the racial reckoning in the United States in 2020 and beyond. So I think some of those were incredibly important. We have a picture of an incredible scientific breakthrough that I think is one of the most astounding pictures in the book. It's of a face transplant.
Yes,
so this is right. This is also taken by Lynn Johnson, who spent 30 hours inside the operating room at the Cleveland Clinic. And she captures the moment when the face is taken. It is already off of the donor, a young woman who died tragically of an opioid overdose. And this face has been put on a tray, and it is on its way to be put on and become the new face of a young woman named Katie Stubblefield, who needed that face transplant to live. And so the face is midway through its journey, and it's literally on a tray. It's kind of shocking, but it's also beautiful. It's on a tray, and you see these doctors clustered around it, and one of them is even taking a picture of the face, and they're looking at it in almost a reverent way. And I think this is one of the most astonishing pictures. And it is a picture of a medical breakthrough, but it is also a picture that tells you about a young woman's determination to have a second chance at life. And I just love this picture.
It was an incredible picture. And I mean, as you say, double taking on that one, I had to look at it. I thought, is this real? It's a very different picture to interpret, isn't it?
Well, I think a lot of people were struck by the picture. It was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize in photography. And so I just think it's one of those, like, oh my gosh, what's going on here? And I want to know more pictures. Another picture in a very different way that I think also strikes that bell is the picture that we have that was on our cover in January 2017 of a young transgender girl. This is a 9-year-old transgender girl named Avery Jackson. And photographer Robin Hammond went around the world, and he took pictures of 9-year-old kids, and he did it for our issue that we did on gender. So we went all over the world, and we said to these 9-year-olds, what's it like to be a boy in your society? What's it like to be a girl? What would it be like if you were someone of the other gender? And somewhere in the process of doing this, we realized that actually we needed to talk to transgender people as well. And that is how we met Avery Jackson in Kansas City, Missouri, who looked straight into the camera, looked right at Robin, and said the most incredible thing. She said, the best thing about being a girl is now I don't have to pretend to be a boy. I mean, out of the mouths of babes, right? Yeah. These 9-year-olds are incredibly intelligent and articulate. And we put her on the cover of National Geographic, and it was an arresting photo that got a lot of attention.
Well, this is probably a good time to ask you, what makes a potent front cover? What do you look for?
Well, of course, our covers aren't always photos either, right? Sometimes we do use a fair amount of illustration as well. Yeah. But what we want is a picture that just tells a big story and that can get somebody's attention. Yeah. I do think the whole idea, though, of the cover is changing. I mean, the cover used to be very important for newsstand sales, but the newsstand has become a very squishy thing, right? COVID has kind of speeded up a trend that we were already seeing, all of us in print media. Newsstand is not as a big a part of our bottom line as it used to be. It can even, frankly, be hard to find a newsstand in which to buy a magazine. Either way, what we really want is a picture that just makes somebody go, I want to know more.
And humor, of course, plays a part. One of the pictures we're able to show on the show page is the polar bear just nudging in to the photographer's lodge. I'm not sure I think I'd have been closing the window a little bit faster and perhaps not thinking about making a frame at that moment.
Well, Paul Nicklin is a very experienced Arctic photographer, right? And this very self-same polar bear had already eaten his hat. Yeah. He ate the seat of his snowmobile, and Paul goes into the cabin and opens that window, and there is this polar bear just coming back for more. This is a picture with both beautiful lighting and beautiful framing, but it is, as you say, one of those pictures that just makes you stop and say, oh boy, what's happening here? What is going on?
Well, the first thing I thought, Susan, was close the window. What's the feedback been like so far?
Oh, tremendous. Yeah. I mean, look, if you go back to where this century began, it really started with Y2K, right? I remember being at the newsroom of the San Jose Mercury News for Y2K, and we were all working way late because we thought everything was going to stop, right? We thought all the computers were going to crash. It was going to be a big disaster. And of course, absolutely nothing happened. And so this is a book of our lives that begin really right after that moment and right up to the present. And I think so many people can just relate to it.
Photographically, does anything still surprise you?
Oh, I get surprised every single day. That's one of the great things about being the editor of National Geographic, is getting to look at the work, and tons of the work, all of the work of these amazing photographers that we are so privileged to work with around the world, and all different kinds of pictures. And suddenly you find yourself interested in subjects that you never thought you'd be in. I mean, I am not a scientist. I've never been a science writer, but some of our sciencey photographers get me really interested in learning more about these topics.
Do you miss being out there telling the stories?
Occasionally I do, but I think there's so much gratification of working with our great writers and our great photographers and with the editors to tell the stories. And it is so wonderful being a journalist at this point in the 21st century, because we have so many ways to tell stories, right? So many platforms that allow us to reach a larger and more diverse audience than we ever could just in print. And I think that's a real privilege of being a journalist right now.
The editor-in-chief at National Geographic magazine, Susan Goldberg. What a complete privilege to talk with her. And I'll recommend, actually, that you go and look up Susan Goldberg as a name as well, and look at her past history, the places she's worked, what she's seen, what she's done. You know, we touched on it just a tad within the interview, but I didn't have that long to talk with her. I tell you what, I'd love to do a special, have a longer hour, maybe more, with Susan to talk about her life as a journalist, as much as, of course, what she does now for National Geo. Right, 2 bits of housekeeping. Housekeeping, Neil. What is this? The local parish meeting at utter whoop-whoop? No, but it is important. The Photowalk Retreat webpage will be soon open to all. You'll find a link on the website. It'll be called, guess what? It wouldn't be called Retreat, would it, Neil? You're one step ahead of me, yes. It's happening on the Isle of Wight. 3 days of the retreat include a Photowalk day, a documentary day, and a sound day. Though you can come a day to a day and a half, actually, earlier to simply enjoy some holiday as well. I thought that might be a nice idea for us to spend some time together. If you wish, we can grab our flasks and a packet of Garibaldis. Yeah, by the end of the week, by the way, you'll be trained in the ways of the Garibaldi, I promise. So that'll be up soon. And here's also a link. Here's the other bit of housekeeping, very important. A link to go visit our patron of the day, Joe Harding, who sent his first 365 in recently to our Community 365. I have a link to his Flickr profile and his photo stream. Certainly, I would say, demonstrates a real love of nature. From turtles to the wonderful fuzzy weed. I love that, fuzzy weed. I'm going to put a link on the show page today so you can go and see his work. And thank you to all our patrons. You're so precious to the show. You really are. And I am genuinely always enthused to hear the notes and the private messages that you send backwards and forwards, where we discuss all kinds of stuff to do with photography. And from the price of one high street coffee per month, patrons, they really do help maintain a future for this cast. And to thank them, all the patrons get to hear the extra more editions, which are a mix of, they're a mix really of personal photographic diary, not quite essays, but diary entries. There's our book club, and sometimes some extended parts of our guest interviews, which you can hear on the very easy to download Patreon app, which almost becomes another, it becomes another private podcast player. And I'm certainly hoping to share more and more as the year ahead starts in 2022. Can you believe we're just a a short hop, skip and a jump away from another new year in these extraordinary times that we frequent. And also we have a Zoom meet each month, an online Zoom meet. Now, it started out as 60 minutes, but it's become 90 minutes. It's just now a 90 minutes thing. Why spend an hour when you can spend an hour and a half, where we all get together, we share a few of our pictures, have a chat about what we've been up to, and I share some show news. There's a tongue twister in the making. Right, here's a letter from John Richard Scales. This is quite the life story, actually, but it's wonderful how it all comes together from John. Mentally, physically, and photographically, actually, all three. I started listening to the podcast, he says, only recently, and this is my first photo that I've sent in to you. The picture was taken on the 5th of October at Godrevy Lighthouse in Cornwall. It was our first trip away as a family. And John, the holiday, as you're about to hear, was something very special, wasn't it? The two pictures that you sent in from it, that moment of photographic quiet, I would imagine just when you needed it most. I'll put them on the show page today. Earlier in the year, he says, my wife had twin girls on the 25th of March. They came 3 months early. It's the same birthday as our eldest, Jack. It was a struggle, says John, for us, as Joanna only saw them for about 3 hours over a total of 4 days, as she was so rough after the cocktail of drugs that she had to have. Our tiny little bundles of joy were very small when born. Beatrice was £2 and Freya was only £1.6. Beatrice unfortunately had a bleed on her brain and is likely to develop mild cerebral palsy. And Freya is struggling with her oxygen. But apart from that, they're strong and they're now progressing so well. This picture that I've sent him was actually a scouting shot the evening before that I went for the sunrise. And I'll add the sunrise shot as well, so you get to see both the scouting. It's so interesting, isn't it, to see people's thoughts. So John went out and he did a scouting shot. And then you see the actual shot as well. So I'll put them both on the show page. I feel so lucky, says John, when I look at this shot for two reasons, which is really important here. Firstly, to be able to go away with my wonderful family now. Yes, I can understand that. But also because I had a period where I almost lost my leg. Back in 2018, 2019, I was playing rugby and was taken out when I broke my leg. I picked up some bacteria during the first operation that led to an infection in my right tibia. From September 2018 to 2019 in July, I had 5 operations that resulted in around 34 hours of operations. My word. All from a rugby accident. Good heavens, John. If the frame that they fitted didn't work, they'd have had no option but to take away my right lower leg. I believe I've come through this tough period, and this is fantastic, I completed the Oxford Half Marathon on the 17th of October. Wow, that's fantastic news, John. That really is. That's 17th of October, John. That's my birthday. We're talking birthdays here, aren't we? I dare say running that race, it must have felt like all yours together. It really must have done. Anyway, John says, to be able to not only walk and take shots like this, but to be able to still run around and play with my girls when they're older is nothing short of a miracle in my mind. And I'm very grateful to still be doing all the things that I do and fully intend on making the most of it. And will go out as often as possible with my camera. Wow, what a story. To the picture then, which you'll see on the show page. It's called One Golden Evening, with what I believe has a dirty foreground, says John. I can't remember what episode that was from, but it obviously inspired him. All the best from John. Great, cracking story, John. Really, so powerful. I'm pleased to hear that your 2 bundles of joy, as you call them, are gaining strength every single day. That's fabulous news. And what a privilege to learn about you and your story, the courage and the resolve and the faith of the whole family. Sounds like it's been a testing time somewhat of late. So it's great to hear a heartwarming end to it. And to the dirty foreground that you talked about, well, that was Finn Beals. Finn Beals was the name you couldn't think of, John. I remembered it for you, the commercial photographer. I talked to him in, it was episode 253. And he mentioned the dirty foreground, didn't he? Which I've adopted shamelessly as a title. I even used it at a wedding I photographed recently. There was a guest taking a picture of something. I said, you know what you need to do to make this picture more interesting? It was kind of a camera workshop moment. He hadn't invited it. I felt I shouldn't have done it, really. I said, why don't you, if you stoop down a bit lower and you photograph across the top of this, I think it was a planter or something. I said, photograph across the top of this, and then this scene is going to have this really interesting thing in the foreground. Oh, he said, and humoured me by getting down on his knees in this beautiful suit that he was wearing, no doubt, expensive suit, and to give him his dues, and photographed across the top of this planter. Probably he instantly deleted it afterwards and went back to the shot that he was trying to make. But yes, the dirty foreground. I was practicing it in reality, I think, before learning the title, but I do love the concept. And the concept of the dirty foreground, you know, where you photograph something foreground and that sort of leads you into the shot or interrupts the shot, or you're photographing through something like, I don't know, like the bush I was talking about, the planter, or it can be sort of through a hole in the wall, or, well, you get the idea. The concept actually came from his grandfather, Finn's grandfather, who mentored a young Finn in the ways of the camera, so he did.
My grandfather was a keen amateur, and my first lesson in sort of composition with him, and I was talking to my mum about it yesterday, actually. You know, he gave me this lesson in sort of the dirty foreground, which is a technique I still use in my work today. It's just like obscuring a bit of the frame with something in the foreground to create that depth of field, as though you're peering in on a scene. And he was just using it with a tree and the holiday cottage that we were staying in on holiday that summer. It just gives that sort of feeling of you get a privileged view on the scene that's happening. You know, it's like you're almost like hiding in the bushes or something. Yeah. Sort of, it gives the viewer a feeling.
That was Finn Beals from episode number 253. I love the concept of the dirty foreground. The dirty foreground. Neil, do you have to do it with that? Is it affectation? Is there such a word? Look it up when you get home. I will. I'm sure there is a word. Yeah, there's a word, isn't there? Yes, Neil, I think you'll find there is. There's a lot of pictures of trees today. Trees and nothing but trees. As you might have expected, as we're in a forest. It's not as dense as I thought, actually. It's been, well, this bit that I'm in here anyway, it's been thinned out. Well, it feels like it's thinned out. I wouldn't imagine there'd have been a lot of places for people to hide, to rob the rich as they came through. I've got the history the right way round this time. I don't know, this feels fairly thinned out. I'd have seen Robin Hood coming from miles away. Quick, detour, take the other way. Put your four-wheel drive setting on. Let's go across that bit there. Right, second guest. Well, you'd have heard me celebrate the work toward the end of the show last week of Tom Stoddart, one of the UK's most important and certainly influential photojournalists. And we played back part of an interview, one that I made back in 2016 on the FujiCast earlier during the week. So I thought, on Photography Daily, I do want to do something different, clearly. So I want to play back a re-edited version of a chat we had but months ago, midsummer, talking about his book, Extraordinary Women, which I will come to in a moment. But there's a letter that's appropriate this week from one of our long-standing fabulous supporters of the show, and a photographer who knew just how important Tom Stoddart was to the world of photojournalism. It was a letter from Andrew Higgins. Hello, Neil. What a sad week it's been for photography. Tom Stoddart, maybe not as well known to the general public as some big names, but he was an absolute giant among press photographers and photojournalists, and many who knew and appreciated his iconic work. In that 21st century way of noting importance, Tom's name was trending on Twitter on the day his passing was announced. Such was the flood of tributes to the man on all social media. The sad news was such a shock to so many, including me. Surely, I said, not Tom. He was an inspiration to me from way back, partly because he had started out working on a local paper, So I felt the same career roots, though he went on to great things and a well-deserved reputation and respect in the photography world. I went to see an exhibition of his work many years ago at Nunnington Hall in North Yorkshire, a National Trust country house which had started exhibiting photography. Tom's photos were, of course, stunning and some harrowing too. I bought a signed copy of his book, Eyewitness, and I still find some images very difficult to look at, but Tom knew they had to be taken. He no doubt had to force his Leica to his eye, knowing that he had to share the story with the world. Like other great photojournalists, McCullin, Salgado, Nackway, and many others, Tom Stoddart is easily among those big names of photojournalism forevermore. I've been meaning to write to you for months to say thank you for mentioning me as a patron of the week. I was even more delighted, though, that by complete chance, that mention was at the start of your interview show with Tom, a photographic hero of mine. I was amused that this will be the only time ever, quite rightly, says Andrew in brackets, that Tom's name and mine might be mentioned in the same breath. I'll admit it felt a little bit of an honour for a few seconds. And he talked about career longevity, just as I've muddled through doing this photography business for decades. So Tom, from local newspaper photographer to renowned photojournalist, was inspiring me once again. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Neil. And I'll take a look at his Eyewitness book again. Inspiration and respect. All the best, Andrew Higgins. Well, thank you, Andrew, for your very considered mail there. And, out of respect for Tom, though I played a few moments of his thoughts about this thing that we love together so much, don't we? That being photography last week at the tail end of the show. I wanted to play back a re-edited conversation with Tom about his new, and it seems sadly now his last book. Unless, of course, there'd been another in the making. You never know, do you, whilst all this was happening? Who knows? But this is Tom talking about his wonderful book called Extraordinary Women, a selection of photographs shot over several decades all over the world, showcasing the will, the endurance and perseverance of women in war and extreme situations. And if you don't have this book, it is one that I highly suggest gracing the shelves of your photo book library. Tom Stoddart.
Extraordinary Women, images of courage, endurance and defiance. Pictures that you've made, Tom, of women in challenging situations, such as war, such as famine. But it's more nuanced than that. There's health and politics playing a role too. The book was so well received, which must have been a delight, especially considering the planning and layouts were all done without any face-to-face meets. This was a lockdown project, which thwarted that sort of planning. But the response has been superb.
You know, that makes me happy because when you're trying to put something together in these challenging times, you know, just simple things. I couldn't sit with Steve Reed, the designer. We had to do everything remotely. Everything had to be done remotely. The concept, what it would feel like, what it would look like, the words, the captions, and above all, normally with a book like this, you would be on press. You would be looking at the quality control all the way down the line, because if you get it wrong with something like this and, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 copies comes off, there's no going back. So that was the difficulty. The difficulty was in the physical act of trying to put something together that, I really wanted it like every photographer. You want to present your work in the best way. I had a wonderful publisher, ACC Art Books, wanted to do a quality book. Robin Morgan from Iconic Images was fully behind it. Getty Images were behind it. In the end, when that magic moment happens and the book arrives, and before you even open it, you smell the smell of a new book is just amazing. And then the trepidation of opening it up and looking at it and then looking for the faults, looking for the spelling mistakes that have been missed, all of the stuff that can go wrong. And in the end, I put it down and I thought, yep, that's pretty good. I'm proud of that. I'm very proud of that.
You have this 5-decade archive, which I would imagine presented you, Tom, with the challenge of knowing what to make your latest book about with an archive of that size. But I'm keen to know how Extraordinary Women became your subject, became the book.
I've always been fascinated by women in extreme circumstances. And also being a man, I've never seen a book put together like this by a man. It's always, you get women photographers who go off and shoot stories and features on women fighters and stories like that. But I hadn't seen it done. And, I have an extensive archive, and I just thought, I wonder if I went through the archive, how many pictures I could put together. And to be fair, the picture that I am best known for, I think, the woman of Sarajevo, was a natural to lead on a project where you wanted to celebrate and pay homage to ordinary women doing extraordinary things. And remembering all the unsung times, the refugee camps I've been in, where when the going gets tough, it's the women who turn their shoulder to the wheel. It's the women who gather the children together. It's the women who feed them, the menfolk and the children first and themselves last. They're pretty much unsung heroes. And I just wanted to give them some credit in a way and try and remind people about the role of women in some of these extreme circumstances. And not only extreme circumstances, but, we remember the wives from the pit strikes, the mine workers' strikes. I'm in the Northeast, and it was the women who set up the food kitchens. It was the women who kept their men proud and sent them out every day onto the picket line. There are many, many examples that you can find just in ordinary life of this kind of thing. So I just wanted to highlight it for a change.
Well, as I looked through the book, there was one particular story that's local to me, just down the road, the Greenham Common Air Base with the peace camp, which was an extraordinary story to cover, wasn't it?
It was an extraordinary story, and in fact, I had a call from the woman in the picture that you referred to in the book. Called me just a couple of weeks ago asking, she hadn't seen the picture of her friend being dragged away and her appealing to the police officers to release her. And I had totally forgotten that it's 40 years. I think, is it 40 years next year?
Yeah, it's a while now.
Yeah, and she is still out there being an activist for women's rights. That's the other thing, how quickly these years have flown by. So it was nice. In putting this book together, I've met up, or not met up, but I've emailed contact with quite a few women who I photographed over the years, and it's been great to kind of reconnect, make sure, and find out what happened to them.
Well, you mentioned Robin Morgan, and he was editor-in-chief of the Sunday Times magazine for the best part of 2 decades, and he'd of course worked with Robin during that period. He writes an introduction in which he points out that this isn't a book about death or horror or terror. You will find pictures in there that will answer to those titles for sure. But this really is about the courage, defiance, and endurance, isn't it?
I hope so. Generally, when I'm shooting, I'm very conscious of dignity, of not poking the camera into people's faces and stripping away their dignity. And with Robin, I was very proud to work for Robin at the Sunday Times and the Sunday Times magazine. Worked with some amazing writers, Adrian Gill, A.A. Gill and others, Marie Colvin. These were top writers who cared passionately about what they did. And so it was a real privilege for me to be in the pages of the magazine alongside some of these wonderful stories.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the word dignity, because I've got it written down here that it is something, Tom, that you manage with your photography to do exceptionally well. There are photographs in here that would be extraordinarily difficult, I think, for most of us to even contemplate photographing. How do you go about it when you've got, for example, and there's that and I think we've talked about this ourselves, actually, when I came to visit you before in Newcastle, that amazing picture of it's life and death happening in one room, isn't it? Where you've got somebody giving birth on one side and someone on the other side of this room, or hut actually in this case, passing away within just a few feet of each other, a victim of famine. It's an incredible picture, which calls upon your experience as a storyteller, as a photographer, but also as a human being, I think. How do you feel? How do you act during these moments?
That situation, I was working alongside MSF, who were doing their best to feed thousands of people in South Sudan at this time when there was awful famine there. I stepped into a hut to get out of the sun, and as my eyes kind of adjusted to the darkness, there was this incredible scene where, as you say, there was a man who'd been brought in by MSF doctors to basically pass away in more comfort out of the sun. But in the corner of the hut was a woman who was about to give birth, being supported by her sisters. And I have to say, I only shot about 7 frames on this, because seeing this situation that of life and death in one frame, it really does take your breath away. And I didn't really believe what I was seeing, and also it was so dark in there that I wasn't sure that the camera and the film that I was shooting at that time would actually even handle it. But it was an incredible scene. The way of working, I think, is very important. I think some of the best photographers who I've watched over the years are the guys who move quietly. They don't barge around and shout and are noisy. They hunt their images. They kind of move slowly. They adapt very well to the situation they're in. They hunt the moment, and then when the moment presents itself and the angle presents itself, they capture it. So I think a lot of that is about style. My style over the years has been working very close to people, shooting in black and white, and keeping it simple. Photography is not a complicated business. Once you press the button the way that you want to shoot and the way it's effective, it's not that complicated. And so I think it's important to have your style and find out what suits you.
Well, I look through the book and I see plenty of powerful images. Are you affected differently as a photographer according to the age? It may seem an odd question, but I'm thinking of this as a family man, and I look at some of the pictures of the younger women in there, or the girls, and I think, there's almost a different emotion attached to them. Does that make sense?
It does. I think you can overthink this stuff. Yeah. One of the things that I found when I was putting this together was just how many stories I've covered. And not everything has to be 3 months or 3 years in a place. You can go for 3 days and come back as long as you have one frame that you're happy with. I think that there are stories that you put your heart and soul into, and then you come back and you in those days you would do it, and then you'd rest for a week and then go again on something else, come back and then maybe look at something maybe political. I mean, if you look at what the political chaos that we're in now and the recent political chaos in America, there's almost too much to photograph at the moment.
Well, I'm keen to talk about you as a photographer and the emotion behind it. We've touched on this before, but this book makes me want to ask this again, Tom. How, as a photographer, you can remain reasonably impartial there as a storyteller, very hands-on pictorially, hands-off in other ways. I would imagine it must tear at you emotionally, that is.
It does, of course. And people deal with it in a different way. I've never had kids. I think maybe it would have been, my emotions would have been more different if I'd have been coming home and picking up my 3-year-old daughter or whatever, I felt, and whenever I was injured or whatever, once I'd recovered, I didn't have any doubts about going back. So I think I was lucky in that respect. Of course, you're unlucky that, you don't have a home life really and all of that. Emotionally, I think it's possible to be a good photographer, a decent photographer, to care about what's in front of you and not, I don't believe in this thing about, he's a war photographer or this, that, and the other. There's not such a thing as a war photographer. It's just the Hollywood thing. I mean, there are people who shoot a lot of war, but then they go off and shoot, I'm thinking about Christopher Morris, shot wars for years and now does fashion and politics and all kinds of things. I note that a lot of photographers in my generation have changed what they're doing. Dave Chancellor has changed. Keith Bernstein has changed the way he works. We're adaptable and it's no good just keep banging your head against a wall if no one wants your pictures. You have to find a way of continuing and making relevant pictures and but still enjoying what you do. So I think many photographers have changed their way they work and adapted really well.
Well, Keith has ended up on the sets of Hollywood and HBO and stuff, hasn't he? And
amazing. We used to run around in Bosnia and in the townships in South Africa, the man is as brave as a lion. I've seen him in some situations that you just wouldn't want to know about. I would count Keith as one of my best friends, and I think when he's having a bad day and he's on a set, a film set, and there's some RC director or an actor that's full of themselves, and if he's getting a hard time, he just looks at them and thinks, you have no idea about real life. And so it gives you an inner confidence, I believe, when you've seen things that other people haven't.
It's very relevant because of the timing, but almost 100 pages through the book, there is a picture of a young Diana prior to becoming the Princess of Wales. I had no idea, by the way, Tom, that the look of horror that she gives in that picture is because she stalled the engine of that metro, that famous metro that she had. But then that picture faces the tributes you photographed on the 10th anniversary of her death. And you will have your own thoughts, of course, about the courage she faced head on. And it's a story that's sort of unravelling on two sides of the Atlantic once more. Do you feel that with all the images you make, with all the stories that you've told, Tom, a sense of disappointment that sometimes we just don't seem to learn? I mean, it's something that Don McCullin has mentioned many times, isn't it?
Well, Don is convinced that, it's not been worth it, that his pictures haven't made any difference.
Yeah.
I believe that's not true. I believe photographs by themselves don't make a difference. It's a drip, drip, drip effect. And I think it's a mistake to think that, and the real tragedy of photographers not covering serious events, not covering, as I say, Yemen and other areas. I mean, today, the other story on the news is about we're cutting aid to places. And there won't be any photographs. There's no photographers out there doing, work that illustrates that. And I believe that that's wrong. That's bad because it gives a false sense of security. It means that young people think that we all live in a world with medicine and we all live in a world with clean water and electricity on tap and whatever. And it encourages, more of the have-it-all society if they're not exposed to anything except selfies and Instagram stuff and whatever. So I think it's a great shame that there isn't at least a small area that illustrates that not all the world is as lucky as we think it is.
It seems fitting, finally, Tom, that the book is dedicated to one very special, extraordinary woman in your own life.
She's amazing. My wife is unbelievable, and without her, I struggle really to continue in terms of producing work. It's about a mindset. I think if you're content in your own world, then you appreciate it when you're going to areas that are hard, and you want to get home as well. But I still think when you shoot your best pictures is when you're full of angst and you're angry, and get in there, get the adventure, start off wanting to be a war photographer and finding out very quickly that you're an anti-war photographer, and then having 10 or 20 years of really, really energy-filled work, and then afterwards you can do what like I do and so many more. We can just sit and talk to you.
It's been an absolute honour playing some more words from Tom Stoddart over the last couple of weeks to you, revisiting some of the interviews, some of the chats that I've had with a legendary British photojournalist, Tom Stoddart, on the show. Right, I would like your help, and this, it's not. No, it's not about money. It's not about sharing on social. This is about you. I would very much like you to tell me what you've learned about yourself in 2021, photographically, and then some. Anything that you photographed this year that you didn't think you'd be able to, perhaps. Well, we heard a story, I suppose. Definitely we heard a story from John earlier, just on that subject alone, didn't we? He wasn't expecting to be making that particular picture of the lighthouse, the one that I've shared on the Photowalk show page today. Also, and this is important, this strength the strength of the show, it's really about you. It's about your experiences, your stories, what you're seeing. And though we do hear the most extraordinary stories of life and incredible guests, don't we? I mean, Tom Stoddart and Susan Goldberg today, really? Yes. But life is made by all the experiences in between, even the glorious small ones, isn't it? Like, I made my first ever street portrait. We had that the last couple of weeks, didn't we? the first ever street portrait made, which seems, for people that do them every day, the first one you ever make, that's the trailblazing picture, isn't it? That's the one. That's the most important of all of them, possibly. Or maybe this year you first actually understood how a speedlight operates. I'd like to share that experience with you. Or perhaps you nailed your first proper rainbow picture, or you photographed something like a march and felt really liberated doing something like that. Or you stood for an hour in woodland with your camera in the rain and thought, I get this thing called photography. I really actually get it. I mean, today I've walked through Sherwood Forest. I can't admit to you that I've made the greatest photographs that I've ever made, but being in Sherwood Forest, I've seen the signs from the motorway so many times and never been here. And now I'm standing in it and I'm making pictures. They can be something and nothing pictures. They're my sketchbook images, but I'm in Sherwood Forest for the first time. Maybe maybe you developed your first roll of black and white film either ever or the first time in years, perhaps even decades. I mean, this is the magic of the show, I like to think. The magic of the show is you. So if you have a couple of minutes, whilst you're drinking a coffee and taking on board a Garibaldi or possibly a rich tea, they're allowed. Digestives, yes. Hobnobs were suggested a few weeks ago. All right. The biscuit of your choice. Then write me and let me know what you've been photographing. That was very American, Neil. Write me. Oh, yeah. Maybe it's rubbing off on me, A lot of American letters. Fantastic. Yes, write me and tell me what you've been doing, what you've done this year, possibly a first, what photography means to you, because I really want to power into New Year and beyond with these stories about the simple pleasures of photography. The email address is studio@photographydaily.show. studio@photographydaily.show. Right. It's time for a play-out song, isn't it? Of course it is. Here's one today. I like this tune. When Mountains Move. This one is called Short Song for Mayor.
I watched her dance in a field, blood orange sundress and a ponytail, spinning around, talking to the clouds. I can't stop time, but if I could, I'd reverse it and go back to the day we met. That first kiss on the cheek, on the roof of her apartment. Walls and mountains divide us in two. God damn it, I'm still in love with you. I don't think it gets any worse than this. I hope not, and I hope not. In a dream I had, I watched her sing to the rain. It was beautiful in the contrast. The sun was glaring off her eyes. I can't stop time, but if I could, I'd fast forward all the way till the day she got here. That first time on the coast by the ocean, somewhere in Oregon. Walls and mountains divide us in two. God damn it, I'm still in love with you. I don't think it gets any worse than this. I hope not.
fabulous song from When Mountains Move. And that's it for this week. My thanks to our guests, the ever-inspirational Tom Stoddart and National Geographic's Editor-in-Chief Susan Goldberg. Thanks too to our patrons. On the More episode tomorrow for patrons, Shakespeare, pastors and Iceland. Really? You can join More. There are now more than 70 additional episodes by clicking on the link on the website photographydaily.show called, funnily enough, Patrons. Coming soon here, an MPB special from Brighton which includes Magnum's Mark Power. And next week, delighted to talk to a printer who's printed for what you might call the rock star fraternity of photographers. Robin Bell is with us. Music on the show today from the incredible artslist.io, and I look forward to photographing with you, hearing from you and talking with you next time.
Carl, we haven't spoken to you for weeks, it seems, on the show.
I've been here.
I know you've been here. Do you know where we are this week, though?
Yep, Sherwood Forest.
Oh, how did you know?
Followed it on my own sat-nav.
Oh, of course you did. It's very famous for Robin Hood, is Sherwood Forest.
Yeah, we have a Robin Hood in Berkshire.
No, we don't.
We do.
No, Robin Hood, Nottinghamshire, Sherwood Forest, yes, not Berkshire. Certainly not Newbury.
We do.
Well, as far as I know, Robin Hood never rode through Newbury collecting money from anybody.
No, Robin Hood, Newbury, telling you.
Well, where?
Robin Hood Roundabout.
Oh, do you know, you're right. We do have the Robin Hood Roundabout. You're quite right, you know. You're a mine of information, aren't you?
Yep, not just a pretty bonnet.
You're absolutely right, Carl. Right, we need to head home. Come on, let's go.
Photography Daily is a Loading Zone production.